Hey, how y'all doing? This is Hunt 919 Truth the Sports coming to you with another segment. Hopefully you all having a good day. Like, comment, and subscribe. And I want to get right into it. These are my preseason game predictions. I'm going to do every game. I'm going to try to do 2 games every other day or at least 4 games a week. So I can get out my preseason predictions, and I can also compare them when the real games happen. At the conclusion of each game, I can kind of go over and see where I was right or wrong at. But I want to get right into it. We can start off. First of all, Colorado will be playing North Dakota State. So I'll start out with Colorado. I will just get through them real quick because everybody knows about the team. Most of us follow them every day. So we know that they have Shedeur Sanders, who's one of the top QBs in the nation. They did have him on the Heisman list, but this morning I read that they took him off of the Heisman list, and one of the main reasons was of his record last year, which he was 4-8. And I kind of agree with that. I don't think you should be on the Heisman list if your team is 4-8. Was a lot of it his fault? Of course it wasn't, but as Coach Prime says, the record counts for the quarterback and the coach, and that's a great point that he made, and I agree with that. But he's one of the top QBs in the nation. He averages over 3,000 yards a season since he's been in college. I think his top season was 3,700 yards. That's when he was at Jackson State. As you know, they have a dual threat in Travis Hunter. We know he will affect the games on both sides. He's also a predicted first top round pick for the pros. They're saying he will be a better receiver in the pros than the DB, which I agree with. Then you have the receivers. You have 2 of the top 30 receivers in the nation. Travis Hunter was on that list, and LeJontay Wester was on that list. And then, of course, we can't forget about Jimmy Horn. Jimmy Horn was the second leading receiver last year with the Colorado Buffs. And then on the defensive side, of course, you have Travis Hunter again, and as I said, a dual threat. Then you have Shiloh, who's leading that secondary as far as a safety. And then you have Warren Sapp and a couple of other NFL players, ex-players that are now coaching. I haven't really dug into the running back room yet, so I really won't get into that. But most of you all know about the Colorado Buffs. So let's get into their opponent, North Dakota State, which is a FCS powerhouse. They did finish 8-3 last year, which is a down season for them because they're normally a national powerhouse. They're normally right there playing for the national championship on their level. They do have a first-year coach, so they're restarting. Well, they have a tradition, but we got to see how this coach is going to keep that tradition going. But one of the main players, if not the top player on their team, is their quarterback called Cam Miller. There was a list of the top 25 quarterbacks in the FCS, and he was ranked number 2. So that tells you a lot about his ability. He'll obviously be a pro prospect next year or at the end of this year. He is in his 5th season starting for the North Dakota Bison. He started 2 playoff games in 2021. And then in the final 8 games of 2021, he started. And then all 30 games in 2022 and 2023, he started. So nothing would scare him. You can't really trick him. He's seen it all. He's played through it all. As you all know, they've beat some big-time teams during the course of his leadership. So they're solid at the quarterback position. He's passed for over 6,000 yards, 48 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, which is great, 1,600 rushing yards and 36 rushing touchdowns. So the guy can play. He was an all-conference second-team selection last year. He was also second-team All-American last year, and he only had 4 interceptions last year, just like Shedeur. So Cam Miller, not only is he, he's obviously talented, he's also 6'1", 209 pounds. So he's not a small guy. So he can see over the offensive line, he can see over the defensive line, and he obviously knows how to pass, he knows how to read defenses, etc. So that would not be their weakness. They do have another person, their backup quarterback, who's very good. His name is Cole Payton. He's another tall guy. He's 6'3", and he's another versatile player. They were comparing him to Tyson Hill, who plays for the Saints, and they're saying that he can line up as anybody. He can line up as a wide receiver. He can line up as a quarterback. He can line up as a running back. He can line up as a tight end. So when you see Cole Payton come into the game, it doesn't necessarily mean a trick play. So he's very effective for their team, and he's another dual threat guy, another dual threat athlete. We get right into the running backs. The running backs, they have a guy named Barkia. I don't want to mess up his name, Barika. Last name is Kpeenu. He had 96 attempts for 500 yards and 4 TDs last season because he had good running backs in front of him. So they're looking for him to step up this year. They have another guy named TK Marshall. He had 79 attempts for 386 yards and 6 touchdowns. So he didn't play a whole lot, but he did find that end zone quite often. And again, he was playing behind a good running back core last year. So they're looking for him to step up as well. They also have a guy named Chamar Brown. He's a very good running back. He had a very good spring. And so he's another big back, 213 pounds, and they call him the prototypical running back. So he's another player they have to look out for. And then the guy named Marty had another good spring. So they have a deep running back room. So they're going to be dangerous. Whoever comes into that game as a running back, they're all good. They all can be starters from reading everything that I read on them. And they're all, their positions or the depth chart can change day by day because they're so good and they're right behind each other as far as production. So those are the names you need to look out for, but it could easily change before the start of the game when they play Colorado. And they also have a very good fullbacks room. They have a starter named Hunter Bronzio, Brozio. He was first team all-conference last year as a fullback. And then there's everything I read was the 2 guys that are behind him are just as good as he is. So the running back and the fullbacks tells you a lot about that team. And those guys, obviously the fullbacks don't mind blocking, and they've gotten credit for being great blockers. As I just said, their starter, Hunter, was a first-team all-conference selection last year. Let's jump right into the receivers and the tight ends. They're saying that this is the most talented position group this year, which is kind of crazy when I just told you how good the running backs are. They're saying the receivers and the tight ends are just as good, if not better, than that group. They have 9 receivers. I counted 9 receivers right now that they have that could get snaps this season. And they're saying all of those guys are very good and very productive. And most of those guys are returning from last year. Their leader is Rajah Nelson. He had 318 yards and 2 TDs. His numbers are only low like that because he played behind 2 good receivers last year. Then you have a guy named Brylan Henderson. He had 16 receptions for 280 yards. He had a good season with just the 16 receptions that he got last year. And then you have to remember that their top 2 receivers last year combined for over 1,500 yards. So they did not leave a lot of passes for everybody else, but at the time that they obviously produced, and they were good players. They just played behind better players. And then for them to come back and be considered the top group this year says a lot about their talent. So I'm just telling you, the backups are just as good as the guys who are going to be starting. And then they do have height. They do have a 6'3" guy and a 6'4" receiver that could come into the games and play and get significant time. So that receiving core with the tight ends and the receivers are very good as well. So everything I read to you so far is showing you how good that this team is. Then you have the receivers and the tight end. Well, I just said that. Then you have the O-line. Now, this is where they're going to lose the game because the O-line have not been good for them in the recent years. They did have a couple of guys who went to the NFL, but overall they were not considered a good O-line. And this year's O-line, they're saying, will also have question marks. So they're going to struggle. The guard positions will be filled with some of the guys who have been in the program for a few years, but they have not played that much. So it won't be a lot of experience on that O-line, and that could get exploited. So look for the offensive line to really affect the game. The defensive line is also, this is where they will lose the game as well because they've struggled with the defensive front. It's been a work in progress for them for the last couple of years, so they've had a lot of growing pains. This year's defensive front is not healthy right now. But if they do get healthy, they're saying that this team could dominate if they get healthy. But we know how health is in football. As soon as you get healthy, you get hurt again. But they have a lot of depth behind them. So some of the guys could step up before the first game and maybe become starters who we don't know about right now. But the biggest addition they made to their line up front is a guy named Hunter Zezen, Z-E-N-Z-E-N. He's a transfer for Iowa State, but he's also coming off of an injury. So look for his name to come up a lot. And The deepest core they have as far as depth is probably the linebackers. They can go 7 to 8 deep if needed. When I say 7 to 8 deep, meaning they could come in and play and you won't notice a difference between the two or between the 3, 4, 5 or whoever gets into the game. They do have notable returns as far as Logan Kopp, K-O-P-P, a guy named Luke Retz, a guy named Nick, and a guy named Oscar Benson. Kopp, C-K-O-P-P, look for his name. They're saying that he could be up for the Buck Buchanan Award. Is one of the top linebackers in the nation. From what I read, they say he's all over the place and he makes a lot of plays. He's also very intelligent. So look for that guy. His last name is Kopp. Logan Kopp, C-O-K-O-P-P. So look out for him. The secondary is another place where they will lose. There are a lot of question marks across the board for their defense as far as the secondary is concerned. They're going to be very young. They're going to be very inexperienced, and Shedeur could really exploit them. So the secondary is going to cost them, I believe. The O-line and the defensive line will cost them, and that's very important going against a quarterback like Shedeur because he's very smart, very intelligent. He knows where to go and he knows when to go to certain receivers. As long as he gets enough blocking, he can really tear you up. So the secondary, the offensive line, and the defensive lines will cause them to lose the game, I believe. And then you're going to have, I think the offense for North Dakota State will keep it close for the most part for the first two halves. And then eventually Shedeur and the offense will take over the game. I have Colorado 1-0 after the North Dakota State game. I do not think it would be an upset, but I do think it will be a good game because of the offensive prowess and Cam Newton that they have on the team. No, Cam Miller, I'm sorry. With Cam Miller being the quarterback and the experience that they have, I think that they will give them a game early on, but eventually Colorado will wear them down with Shedeur just eating them up all across the board. So I have Colorado 1-0 going into the second game against Nebraska. It's been Hunt 919, Truth to Sports. Ride with me. It's been Hunt 919, Truth to Sports. Ride with me.